Hi, I prepared some notes here to guide my commentary, and I just put a title on top of it, Embracing Gratitude and Releasing Perfectionism, specifically anxiety, grief, grievances, and avoidance or avoidance behavior. So perfectionism, I will say a little more about it, how it's related to gratitude, and also how it's related to anxiety, grief, grievances, and avoidance. Um, so yesterday, someone recommended that I tell a story to set up my main points, and I will do that. I have a story prepared, true story, in fact. Um, I will share that story after a few introductory points. That's to kind of set up the context of, you could say, how I am inviting you to listen to this. So the first contrast that I am going to present to you today is doing a thing because it fits, or doing a thing because it makes sense to me to do, as distinct from doing a thing because it is right, doing a thing because people should do that. That's how people should be. So this contrast, if we think of it as a spectrum or a polarity, there's a variety of places along the spectrum. But there's doing a thing out of spontaneous inspiration, um, you know, just seems like the thing to do. No justifications needed. And then doing things out of anxiety about whether or not it's the right thing to do, whether people should do this. And when I've been operating in that mode of, is this something I should do or not? That's also known as agonizing. So the background is anxiety and agonizing, fear, paranoia. Am I properly attracting social validation and avoiding social condemnation within a particular social context? So that is a very stressful mode of operating. And if I am operating in a mode like that, one thing to do might be to alter my circumstances to the extent that I have the power to do so. I will talk about some specific alterations a little later. But first, I just want to set up this basic contrast so you kind of get an idea of what I mean by perfectionism in part. So there's doing a thing because it fits. And in that case, so that's going to be our natural state and the contrasting state to perfectionism. Um, how does one operate when they're just doing a thing because it fits, because it seems like the thing to do? It's the natural thing to do, spontaneously, they're doing it. Well, in that mode, they're attentive to what they're doing, and that it fits with some context. So if the context changes, then they're probably going to change what they're doing. So they're open to adaptation. If what they're doing doesn't work well, then they'll try something different, or at least eventually, they'll stop. They won't probably get frustrated. They'll just be disappointed and stop. They're not in that mode of, I have to make this work, which sets up frustration. So they're attentive, they're calm, relaxed, possibly. They're open to adaptation. They're open to altering their pace or stopping. Altering the pace means not keeping the pace the same, but either increasing the pace or decreasing the pace. And when doing a thing because it fits, there's kind of this innocent, there's no massive explanation, no massive defense of the thing. If people condemn them, they'll be like, I don't really get it. What's the condemnation for? Okay, you don't want me to do that. I got it. All right. I don't understand why necessarily, but good gosh, that apparently upset you or offended you a lot. All right. So there's that innocent or pure mode of operating. No need for passionate justifications or hysterical denials. That's not what I intended. That's not what I was doing. I was doing it because I had a really good reason, which is X, Y, and Z. So there's doing a thing because it fits, or because somebody perceives a fit between whatever context and motivations, and then some particular method and outcome that's available through that method. So that's simple. There is alertness, there is perceptiveness, there is presence of mind, there's focus. There's a potential for efficiency and productivity in that mode that might not be very likely in the next mode. So we'll explore it a little further. I will get to my story. This is still just the introductory points. Doing a thing because it's right or because people should. So you are probably familiar with this mode as well. You've observed other people in it. You've done it yourself. There's attention to socially conditioned ideals. How people should be, what is right to do, what is always right. So when people are basically afraid of social criticism, they also will compete for social validation. There's just this background of tension and I don't know if I want to say hysteria, but anxiety. So when we operate, when we're intimidated and we're scared and we're bullied, then this is a natural thing for us to do because we want to avoid punishment and we want to attract reassurance and validation and rewards. So we find the right ideals, and if we ever find that our previous ideals aren't working very well, then we might jump to another set of extremist ideals. So I jump from vegetarianism, this may not be a great example, but I jump from vegetarianism to an all raw dietary orientation. So it's, you know, really extreme and exclusive, and I'm, you know, faithful to it. I'm better than other people. I'm perfect. I'm doing the right diet. I used to say that vegetarianism was the right diet until it didn't work very well for me. So I tried this. I found a new the right one, and you know, I was really anxiously compulsive about adhering to that diet, defending that diet. I'm going to filter out information that's, you know, like any criticism or questioning skepticism of the right thing. I'm just going to dismiss those people as idiots. Well, they just don't respect me or whatever. So there's an interesting inferiority complex, superiority complex kind of background for some of this. So I want to be loyal to the right thing, or perfect relative to those sacred ideals. I want to be faithful to the ideals. Different from I want to be happy and functional and effective. There's that scared orientation of I want to be loyal. I want to be obedient. I want to avoid punishment and attract validation and approval and that kind of thing. So in other words, this is all about fear of criticism, paranoia about condemnation, punishment. It's already got distress all over it, and probably a concern about the display of distress to other people. So we want to pretend not to be distressed. We want to numb ourselves to our own distress if we're in that mode of perfectionism for a long enough period of time. You know, we need to be sincere that we like being obedient and loyal to these ideals. That it is working for us. We're not going to look at our results because we want to maintain this facade that everything is great. That there's never been any disappointment, because if I look at results, some of them could disappoint me, then I could experience disappointment. Other people might notice me experiencing disappointment. There goes my facade of perfection, and everyone knows, this is in quotes, everyone knows that disappointment is super shameful, and it's, a negative emotion to be sad or whatever. And so there's, that context of shame and paranoia. So that's like suffering. That's a hellish kind of experience relative to the simplicity and innocence of, I'm not sure what to do. Let's see what fits. Let's try some different things. Let's see what I like. So in the mode of perfectionism, also, a lot of things get interpreted as personal criticism that might not be meant as, they might be criticisms, but they aren't necessarily meant personally. They're not personal condemnations. They're not intended to humiliate. Though certainly that can happen. Someone can intend to humiliate someone else. It's also common for someone operating in a mode of some degree of perfectionism to expect condemnation, expect derogatory criticism. They're used to a context of social competition for approval, so other people are probably going to want to put them down. That's just, they expect to be insulted, like, for other people to intentionally intend to insult them, to humiliate them, to confuse them, to embarrass them, that kind of things. So while that's certainly possible, and someone can have past experiences of those things, it may be notable that people make a lot of accusations about criticisms and condemnations that are creative, where they're like preemptive, really is the point. So they're making these preemptive accusations to test, they presume other people have bad intentions or ill will, so they accuse others of bad intentions, ill will, condemnation, criticism, whatever, harassment, humiliation. And then, they either withdraw before noticing what people's responses are, or they make the accusation and then see how people respond, to notice who is respectful, who is receptive, who is patient, who seems to care, who seems quite dismissive and relaxed about it, who seems to want to defend themselves and say, no, I have good intentions, or whatever response that someone might have. So in regard to the rest of this video, if you take anything here as a personal criticism of you, but without me specifically referencing you, then that could be a sign, right? I'm presenting a set of contrasts, and I'll be talking about how each of the behavioral patterns have some specific functionality or limited functionality. They all fit, but they only fit when they fit and where they fit and how they fit. So everything I'm talking about is something I've experienced, and generally speaking, you've probably experienced everything I'm going to talk about, and you've probably witnessed it in other people. You might be more attentive to how annoying it is when other people manifest these behaviors, but that's fine. That's a perfectly valid stage of a learning process. And I'll even say more about when other people are displaying certain things and it is annoying, what are some relevant things for me to do. In fact, I'll get to that right now. And then we'll get to my story. What is relevant for someone who frequently presumes that others are criticizing them? Here's a list. This could be important. If there were to be a test or a quiz, this would be on it. What is relevant for someone who frequently presumes that others are criticizing them? What are relevant adjustments? Increase awareness of possible discomfort, tension, or stress. Like, get interested in it so that I can notice if I'm starting to get stressed by something. That is very important foundation. So I want to quickly notice possible stress, possible threats. I'm not saying that there aren't any threats, that no one ever attempts to humiliate someone else or whatever. So the idea is, if I'm presuming that others are criticizing or condemning me, I want to increase my awareness of possible discomfort, tension, and stress. And I want to do things that, basically to say increase awareness is a very conceptual answer. I want to do things that support an increasing awareness. That could be finding relaxed, calm presentations about the subject matter so that I'm actually kind of alert to these issues. So that would increase my awareness of possible tension, discomfort, and stress. As far as physical manifestations of tension, discomfort, and stress, if I'm exercising or going to get a massage twice a month or something, then other people may notice things in me, or I may feel it within my own self, or if I'm stretching a lot, I may feel, wow. And if I just have like a routine to stretch, then I'm going to feel where I'm all tense. I didn't know I was so tense, but now I do. So there's a variety of ways to increase awareness of possible discomfort. The biggest is just to be alert to it. I think this is a conceptual thing to say, but just be alert to your heart rate changing, to your breathing patterns changing, to, when you get tense, when you clench up a little bit physically. If you're interacting with somebody and you notice yourself relaxing, you notice that. If you're interacting with somebody and you notice a kind of a sudden increase in stress or discomfort, you would notice that. So the idea is maybe take some time every 2 hours or every hour. You could set an alarm, do a little 2-minute meditation, breathing practice, body awareness practice, and get in the habit of noticing tension relatively early, not a month after it's built up or a decade after it's built up, but an hour after it's been building up. Okay? So this does lead up to, as far as taking little interruptions, making routines or habits to interrupt other momentum. This leads right into the next idea. Manage the pace of all interactions. Be responsible for noticing what pace works well. So if there is an issue with not enough frequency of interaction, then attempt to increase the pace of interaction with a particular person or with lots of people, like with different participants. So you can just have more interactions more frequently with whatever group of people, whatever set of people. You can also, of course, decrease your pace of interactions. And sometimes, if I were to decrease my pace of interaction, I might want to lengthen the actual duration of an interaction. I'm going to give this example. If I were to be interested in some kind of counseling, mental health counseling, going to a psychiatrist, something like that, so I could go once a week for basically a 45-minute session for once a week. It might be more valuable to me to go once a month for a 2-hour session, because I can get so much deeper in that 2-hour period of time. The specialist can have more time to get deep, to really, really fully explore and resolve issues, not just skim the surface, but get deeper into issues and really resolve things. And then, once a year or something like that, people might do a weekend retreat where they have 48 hours, for instance, to, really explore rituals of self-discovery and healing and resolving of emotional tensions and noticing sources of stress and discomfort, and that kind of thing. So pace doesn't just mean frequency. It also means sometimes we decrease the frequency and increase the duration. Other times, pace means radically increase the frequency of interactions, but make the very short duration, very nibble-sized, bite-sized bits. So we just have a really, really, comfortable amount. I can digest it fully, and maybe we do a daily reading from Scripture, and it's the 5-minute, or 10 minutes that I read, but it's not this, weekend intensive workshop or something that goes really deep. That for some people at some time isn't necessarily a great situation. The thing about workshops is they tend to have a social context. I can do a little reading by myself. I can do a 2-hour counseling session with one person, like one-on-one, or maybe a couple goes to one specialist, or maybe the two lawyers and the two members of the couple meet for 2 or 3 hours and get a lot resolved if they all get together for a decent chunk of time, like 2 or 3 hours, and hash it all out and really get a lot of progress in a short period of time, instead of little tiny nibble bite-sized things where nobody's really getting any momentum. So there's just managing the pace of interactions. Again, these are a list of things relevant for people who frequently presume that others are criticizing them, and that are experiencing stress about that. Select to interact most with people who seem the most attentive, the most perceptive, and the most respectful. So if you were going to go to a counselor or go to a weekend retreat, you'd probably want to consider a few options and pick the one that really appeals to you. Maybe explore and get familiar with the different alternatives so you can be confident in the one you select. Similarly, anybody you interact with, you can select for people who are the best fit for you if you're really sensitive to being criticized. In particular, be selective about interacting with people who are attentive, perceptive, respectful, who help you to be aware of comfort, who are actually taking little breaks and asking little questions and saying, how's this pace for you? And how are you feeling? And what's your experience for this? What are you getting out of this? Is there anything we need to change, or any requests that you have, or any questions that you have about what we covered so far? Just, good communicators, high quality communication. So that's another item. So there's increasing awareness, managing pace, being selective in who you interact with, and then, or at least selecting to concentrate your interactions with certain people. You may not have a lot of choice about certain people you interact with, but where you do have choice, concentrate on people that are interacting with you in ways that you consider to be high quality interaction, that are resolving stresses and relieving stresses. If stresses arise, if stresses get created, they get resolved, and there's actually let's say momentum. There's an overall ease and relaxation and benefit to you. Even with no compulsion to do it, no obligation to do it, nobody's saying you should do it, you still want to do it. That's kind of a good sign. So if your insurance company or your court is telling you have to do this or else we're going to put you in jail, or you have to do this or else you're going to lose the job, well, those are pressured contexts. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just different from, what if you have to pay out of pocket, or what if you have to go out of your way to set up stuff? If you have to invest your time and your energy in selecting something, then that could be a good thing for some people. Instead of where people are pressuring them to do something, there are contexts where if everybody is volunteering to participate, then that sets up a high quality of interaction. If there are some people who are assigned, it's like those college classes or high school classes where there are requirements. Well, those classes have people who don't really want to be there, and then you have elective classes, and as you get more and more obscure with the electives, you get a higher and higher proportion of people who really are interested in that subject. If they're in that elective that has no requirement as far as graduating, it's not even part of their major, for instance. It's not part of any major. It's just this, what do they call it, a personal interest class, that's offered at the community college for the community. It's not part of a program. It may not even be a credit class. It's just a little thing. You can go to it, and everybody who goes to it, whether it's free or whether they paid for it, they volunteered to be there. They're not there, or we can presume that a very high proportion of people are there because they actually are interested. So there is a lot of interest. So we can select for the kinds of interactions where everybody involved is doing it really out of just a natural, spontaneous interest, pure, innocent motivation. Last, and then we'll get to my story, last recommendation as far as what's relevant for people who frequently presume that other people are criticizing them or condemning them. Target an overall withdrawal from concentrated social activity, maybe being in big crowds, whatever it is that is familiar and might be triggering a maintenance of numbness or baseline anxiety that's kind of what you think of as normal so you don't notice it. We'll start to reduce those things, start to opt out of those things and see if that produces relaxation. So target an overall withdrawal from concentrated social activity. So this is kind of the opposite thing to focusing on interacting with people who are really good communicators a lot. Well, if you don't know how well, how good a communicator someone is, or if you only kind of presume you've been interacting with them a lot, you have this kind of habitual thing, routine established, start to vary those routines, withdraw or decrease repetitive, concentrated social activity like you're always interacting with a certain person. We'll take some breaks. Take a break for a week, whatever it may be, take some breaks. So the idea here is to interact with a greater variety of people, but none of them very much. So you interact with more people, less each. So withdraw from concentrated social activity. What's that called? Deconcentrate. Disperse your social interaction. Diversify. So interact with more people, less. That's really what that means. Withdraw from concentrated social activity to withdraw, including to withdraw with a greater variety of people, but less. So you get exposure to a variety of people, and you will notice some of them seem to be more fun to interact with, better quality of interaction, more attentive, more respectful, etc., more perceptive, more wise, more experienced, more intriguing, more mature. So if you interact with a bigger variety of people, then eventually some of them are probably going to stand out as people you like to interact with more, so you can concentrate toward them. So those are basically the recommendations I have for someone who frequently presumes that others are criticizing them. No, so I mentioned an example. Here I am pretty deep into the presentation, but there is a real example here. So young boys, I'll get to the specific story. I do still want to introduce it just a bit. This is about me as a young boy. So young boys of a certain age typically like to be physically active a lot, including wrestling. So this is a story involving me wrestling. I have a little pre-story too. Young boys of a certain age, they really like to wrestle with each other. If left unsupervised for a long enough time, they're likely to wrestle, whether they're adopting roles of superheroes or whatever to explain the wrestling, they're just going to wrestle at some point. They also may wrestle with pets. So in my case, I didn't have another young boy around me in my home that I was raised in. So I either have friends around, or in the absence of friends, at a certain period of time, I had a dog that I wouldn't say I would wrestle, but I would chase the dog and attempt to tackle it. And the dog was faster than me, so it didn't work great. If the dog, was chasing me, it would always be able to catch up with me, and it could, nip me, just softly bite me or something, as I'm running. Like the dog could always catch me. So there was an inequality in our speed and dexterity and agility. Like if I would be just about to catch the dog, it would dart in a different direction. I could really never do anything but barely touch its hips or something, or its tail. In fact, that was really pretty hard to do with that dog at that age for me. But the idea was I wanted to be really physically active, and contact with another person was very natural. Play fighting, maybe tugging with something. I think girls might tug more than they wrestle, but they still would tug. And that's a similar kind of thing, especially if it's done playfully. And I don't know that girls do it playfully. I think the thing is they'll just tug to really seriously, be angry. I want that toy. No, I'm not going to share it. And I'm not sure which of the differences I'm talking about are cultural. For me, I think that there are genetic differences between boys and girls. I mean, obviously there are, but I think that this wrestling thing is part of it, or the physical activity thing in general is part of it. And I also think that there are cultural variations. So I'm going to attempt to wrestle with other boys, ideally. Attempt to wrestle with a pet that's appropriate, probably a dog. There's not really any pets that work for that kind of horseplay. Sometimes a group of boys and a dog or a few dogs will all play together, and that's fine. Also, I would wrestle with adults, and they might be my least preferred partner in wrestling. But if I have no one else available, and as I said, in my youth, in my household, there were no other young boys. I had a sister that was a few years older than me. She didn't wrestle with me, that I recall. My mom didn't wrestle with me. My dad. So this is where we're about to get to the real story. So, as I was saying before, I attempted to chase the dog, but I would get frustrated with that because I just couldn't catch the dog. There was a certain age where if I see a tree and there are branches and limbs that are strong enough at a low enough point on that tree, I'm going to go for climbing that tree. I'm going to try and get to the, if I'm unsupervised or if I don't have anything else going on, I'm going to magnetically go to that tree, try and get to those branches, see if I can reach them and go up a little bit. And I might obviously get injured. I believe I did fall out of a tree at one point. And I think my dad may have actually cut down a certain tree because he was like, that's not going to happen again. Like the first time I fell out, he was like, okay, that tree's getting moved. And it was, maybe 20 or 30 foot tall tree. Not huge, but not a bush. And I'm pretty sure he simply took it out and, put it out by the side of the road to go out with the garbage. So I wrestled with my dad. So the fact that I wrestled with my dad isn't really the story. That's still kind of the setup for the story. So I wrestled with my dad at some point, and I don't know of a specific occasion of this happening, but imagine that I'm wrestling with my dad, and my mom comes in and sees us. This is where the story gets interesting, the triangle aspect of it. So mom says to dad in relation to me, this part of this is true. I don't remember the exact dialogue as far as what was said however many decades ago. So part of this might be inaccurate. But imagine that the mother says to the father, do not encourage him. One of you could get hurt. So I'm pretty sure my mom said something like that to my dad, and possibly in front of me. Maybe repeatedly, maybe a few times. She said, I told you, speaking to my dad, I told you, don't encourage him. One of you could get hurt. So she's scolding him, and she might be scolding her husband, the father, in front of the child, in that case me. So one of the outcomes of that was my dad stopped wrestling with me, and I did not like that. I would want to wrestle with him, and I was used to wrestling with him, and he declined. I did not like this. I don't really have more to say about that part of the story, but that's a significant detail that actually sets up why I remember it, and why I'm retelling it is because he withdrew from wrestling with me, and he said his explanation, which I understand. I mean, I understood it at the time. It made sense what he said. I don't know that it was a complete version of what was really going on in the background, because I think it may have been. There may have been some pressure from my mom. In fact, I'm very confident there was pressure from my mom on him to stop horseplay, roughhousing with me. I assume some of you know the term roughhousing or horseplay. So, so I may come back to some elements of that story. I want to focus, for our present purposes, we're talking about embracing gratitude and all the things about perfectionism. Before I get to why do I speculate my mom was upset there, or these are my adoptive parents I'm talking about. before I speculate about why she was upset, which is a very interesting part of this presentation, I also want to note I was grateful. Maybe you can hear it in my voice and see it in my face. I was grateful to have my dad as a wrestling partner, and to this day, I still look back on that and say, I lost my wrestling partner. That sucked. There's like grief, right there for me. Is I was really grateful, and then there was an interruption of the thing that I was really grateful for, and there was grief for me. There was disappointment, sadness. I don't know that there was rage, but could have been. And we'll come back to grievances and rage and that kind of thing. So, so I was grateful, and that was interrupted, and now we're kind of bridging right into why might mom have been upset. So she was saying that I might get hurt. She was saying one of you might get hurt, but I think I was the one getting hurt that would have been a concern for her in particular, because reasonably I wasn't hurting my dad. Even if I scratched him or something, I don't know. See, I didn't take that part seriously. So if that is true, I don't buy it. I don't think my dad would have hurt me, because he was not nearly as rough as people my own age, because he was strong. So he didn't, if I got hurt wrestling with my dad, it would be like, because he was standing up and I tried to climb up him and I fell on my head or my shoulder really weird or something, my elbow or something. Like it wouldn't have been because he tried to hurt me or because he did something dangerous. It would have been because I was too negligent and too dangerous. And that makes sense to me. Again, what the perspective of the parents here makes sense, but there was an element of complexity that I do want to at least speculate existed, and part of that is in relation to this issue of me getting hurt. My sense was it was super safe for me to wrestle with my dad. It was safe for me to wrestle with my dad. However, I actually got seriously injured and sent to the hospital at a martial arts tournament. So by cutting off my safe, preferred interaction with my dad, I assume that was my preferred. I'm not totally sure. Maybe I whined and complained and nagged and said I must be in this martial arts program once I found out that it existed. Maybe my friends were in it. I don't remember my friends being in it. I don't know. But I got into some class where twice or three times a week or whatever, I would go to the mall where they had this gym area and mats and a martial arts class for kids. So I got into a martial arts class. I advanced to a level where I got to be in a tournament. And in the tournament, I was my first tournament is where I got seriously injured, and I was matched with somebody slightly older than me. The main point of this is that when and where did the concern about me getting hurt begin and end? If the idea is I don't want the boy roughhousing with the dad because the boy might get hurt, and then there's no safety concern in a situation that doesn't involve the dad, that actually starts to get interesting. So back to the martial arts context, somebody else that was in my same martial arts class might have been doing another martial arts class for a while, but they come into this new type of martial art, and they have to start at a white belt or novice level, even if they're experienced, even if they're stronger, bigger, and older than me. If it's like 7 and 8 year olds, and I just turned 7, and they're almost going to turn 9, but haven't yet. Well, then we're in the same bracket. So, and that's a big difference, like a 100-pound kid and a 70-pound kid, or whatever it may be. However they match people, you can have some pretty big differences in those small-aged kids. So, if the other child had been doing martial arts and was still ranked at a yellow belt within that martial art, but was actually really good and really competitive, that could have been related to me getting hurt. And again, boys, of similar age who are wrestling with each other. In fact, I'm not at all complaining about the fact that I got hurt by that boy. That was like I had, we were in a match. We were wrestling. He was just doing, he's sincere and earnest and fighting hard, and I got seriously injured. So there was no personal antagonism. It's just a competition. We everybody volunteered to do it. Um, but I was scared. I remember being scared. I'm not sure that I liked the idea of the tournament, especially once I saw my opponent. Once they kind of like set up, okay, here's what we're going to do. My very first opponent, I'm not sure, maybe you walk out to the mat and that's when you see them. I don't remember how it was done. But I'm pretty sure that I was like, oh, wow. I don't know, maybe I was like, oh no, I'm a yellow belt. I'm going to kick his butt. But I don't think I kicked his butt. I don't think I had any chance in that one. Um, so, uh, so the setup as far as how, in a tournament setting, if there's social pressure of, oh, you love doing the martial art, you want to do really well, just go do that. You'll be fine. Go to the competition. Oh, you won't get hurt. Well, I did get hurt, and uh, the concern for safety of the child and avoiding injury, that's something to consider. So is a the father of the child, an adult, a safer opponent, or another kid who's not very skilled and who's really eager and who just wants to, win the title and win the championship and is super competitive? Which one's likely to be safer or less safe? So I get back to this issue. Mom comes in, scolds dad. At least in my imaginary version, however true it is, I'm not entirely sure. Scolds dad, don't encourage him, meaning encourage me to horseplay. One of you could get hurt. So mom says that. But how concerned was she with safety? I don't think she was that concerned with my safety, honestly. Especially given the context that then I got injured in the martial arts thing, that I think that's a pretty obviously unsafe thing relative to wrestling with dad, who was like, basically he would just, he was really strong compared to me, so he would just peel me off of him if he wanted to. I mean, generally speaking, he had no problem handling me, kind of like the dog I was referencing. The dog could get away. So anyway, so what I think could have been going on, though, was this background of perfectionism. She wants to do the right thing. She wants to do, what people should. The mother should want the child to be safe and all that. But it's really, I think that there was more. There was a triangle thing. I mentioned triangle. There's the father, the mother, and then the child. I think there was an actual triangle there. I don't know if you're starting to get where I'm going with this, but how concerned was she with being criticized by others for neglect? Maybe, like for, oh, you should have, prevented the child from being injured. I think she probably was concerned about being criticized for being negligent. I don't know that she was especially concerned for my safety directly. Maybe for the complications that an injury would cause for her, honestly. I think that I don't know that she would have known that until I got seriously injured in the martial art thing. I don't know that she thought, oh my God, this is a lot of extra work for her to take me to doctors and all these things for dealing with the injury. I had a break of a bone. It wasn't like out of the skin, but it was a fracture, and it was painful, and I had to have, a cast and a variety of, it was a huge amount of extra attention that came to me. And if we think of it as a method for me to attract attention, getting hurt or getting sick, pretty reliable way to get attention from mom. For those of you who didn't notice that already, or can be effective. So my thought is that my mom in interacting with my dad, I bet you won't expect this. I think that she was maintaining a proposed persona that suppresses certain emotions. She's maintaining a persona that suppresses certain emotions. With my triangle reference, I was kind of hinting toward jealousy, and that's true, or that is what I'm thinking was the case. But there's a little more to it. Back to gratitude. So here's this little boy, super excited and happy to be wrestling with dad, loves wrestling with dad, having fun, delighted, laughing, just, and maybe saying, I'm going to beat you up, or whatever he's saying as part of the, role playing and the superhero, I'm Batman and whatever. But just tremendous gratitude and joy. The child has all this joy and gratitude for the interaction with the father, and the mother sees that. And how does the mother respond to that? Does she go, oh my God, that's awesome, or something else? Does she have triggered envy, triggered shame, like, whatever? Does something get triggered for her that's uncomfortable for her? Why is she uncomfortable with us making noise and horse playing in the next room? Is it that we're distracting her? Which if it were, then we could go to a different area. She could move to a different area. We could go outside. There's a variety of things. If we're just distracting her, then she doesn't have to interrupt the whole thing. But if she's actually targeting scolding the father for endangering the child, she's trying to interrupt the whole interaction. And kids expressing their delight can be challenging for adults. Adults who suppress their delight and their joy and their gratitude, they will be anxious in the midst of openly expressed delight and joy and gratitude. They're actually jealous of the child for being so open and expressive and innocent and pure. And then they can also be jealous of but what they'd actually process is more likely, well, that other parent is being irresponsible. I'm mad at them. I've told them before not to encourage the child. And right under that is jealousy for the parent, for that parent being open to delight and being the target of gratitude of the child. But the deeper jealousy could be jealousy for the child's openness and purity and innocence and emotional expressiveness. So that's the story. I want to make another comment before I get into a bigger analysis of it. But a parent observing another adult interacting with a child and them all having a lot of fun could be really proud and happy and encourage them. In that case, the mother could encourage the father to keep horse playing. He really seems to like that. Even if you don't like it, do it a little more. It's just so nourishing, and I just love hearing him laugh, and I'm just so proud of us as parents, and all that kind of thing. So that's also possible. One of the twists with pride, and it may be more an issue for mothers than fathers, and it may be more an issue for adoptive mothers than biological mothers, there can be a concentrated pride issue, meaning they concentrate all their pride in being a mother. In certain cultures, that's often the case. If they have just one or two children, again, their pride is concentrated in very, very limited ways, meaning there's like a background of anxiety there. So when even one parent has a very concentrated sense of pride in their whole identity is wrapped up or organized around being a parent, again, I think that can be awesome, but it can result in, if there's anxiety with their focus on parenting as an important value, then they bring anxiety to that focus on parenting, and they're anxious about whether the child makes them proud or not, or whether the child embarrasses them or the children. So there can be a burden, an experience of burden for the child, because the child must be perfect, must create pride for the parent. That's the child's job in the family dynamic, is make the parents proud, or make mom proud, or make grandma proud, whatever. The child must be perfect, must make the right people proud, must make their teacher proud, the same kind of thing. Must never embarrass important people. And on the subject of embarrassment, I would just note to anyone who is not a parent yet and might become one soon, this is a warning to prospective parents. If you raise children for a few decades, it is extremely likely that they will occasionally embarrass you. Just want to get that out of the way. I want to throw that in. So now we're going to get to kind of the final section, which is gratitude, grief, grievances, and avoidance. So the story was to set up all of this. So this is a little more, exploration of some of what can be going on in the background for people. Perhaps my mom in the case of the story I mentioned. So gratitude. Basically, gratitude is just this natural, spontaneous thing that happens. Really similar to joy. If somebody's enjoying something, they have gratitude about it. Bam. Boop. Simple. A small child naturally creates fun and expresses their fun. They will find fun. They're like little units, machines looking for fun stuff. That's pretty normal for the average healthy child, a certain age, like 3 years old or whatever age. They go around looking for things that are fun for them. If they're not fun for other people, that's a different issue. But they're creating fun for themselves, and they're completely on display as far as the fact of when they're having fun or when they're not. If they're bored, if they're scared, whatever it is, they're just totally on display about whatever. So if they're having fun, if they're delighted, they're going to laugh, they're going to be loud. That's normal for a certain age of child. They haven't learned to be polite yet. So why do they, or how do they learn to avoid having too much fun? Well, children can be pressured. There can be a context, whether it's intentional or not, there can be a context of the idea that it's best or preferable for children to be seen but not heard. So the children will eventually be discouraged or punished for being loud. Maybe they'll be told about Santa Claus, and if you're quiet and you play quietly on your video game and turn off the volume and plug it into your ears with your earbuds and I can't hear the beep 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 of the video game, then you'll get better presents. You'll get more video games for Christmas if you'll be quiet, please. So it can be said in a respectful, direct way. It doesn't have to have the deceptions of Santa Claus and everything, but those are also somewhat effective in some cases. So the seen but not heard idea, it can be a preference of adults. That can be their real functional preference. So they don't want kids that are loud, at least in certain social environments like a restaurant. You don't want the kids to be too loud because it'll be too distracting to you. And what's really distracting is that it'll distract other people and the parent would be embarrassed. When the 3-year-old is super loud at a restaurant, it doesn't bother the 5-year-old. If other people look at the table and are staring, the 5-year-old doesn't care. The parents might care. The parents might not want criticism or condemnation or being kicked out of the restaurant or whatever punishments might be. The parents are the ones who are maintaining the social. They're concerned about social adaptiveness. They're attuned to social adaptiveness. So if there's a context where the parents choose to put pressure on the children to be seen but not heard, to be quiet, to be polite, whatever, that's pretty normal. At some point, adults are going to pressure children to be mature, act your age, quiet down, calm down, settle down, any of those kind of things. That's pretty normal. So, if there's a mode of avoiding social criticism and competing for social approval, then you want your kids to be the most polite. You want your kids to be the most quiet or appropriate for whatever social setting, the most well-behaved, whatever that means in a particular social context. So there could be jealousy between parents within different families. I mean, one family as a whole, the adults in one family are jealous about the parents in another family because their kids are quiet, or whatever kinds of things. Or they're proud. Parents can be proud that their kids are well behaved, so they reinforce, quiet, polite children. They reinforce quietness and politeness and shyness in children. Don't go start conversation with strangers. In some social contexts, the parents will really guide the children and be with the children through lots of transitional stages. So there won't be just shelter and then no shelter. There'll be shelter and then different levels of shelter. So the parents or other adults or older brothers and sisters, whatever, will help with that transitional supervision. So instead of don't talk to strangers, will be, well, you can talk to this stranger. It's the cashier at the grocery store where we go every week and we see this cashier all the time. You can talk to this stranger at least about certain things. Don't mention mommy's weight gain or grandma's cancer or that grandma died or whatever. There's certain, whatever the context, whatever the restrictions might be, generally there's these kind of gradual transitions of, well, there might be a rule of don't talk to strangers, but the cashier isn't a stranger because we've seen this cashier several times and, mommy knows the cashier a little bit, so it's okay. Or whatever other issues, whatever other context or circumstances might be present. So gratitude's natural, and children might have their gratitude suppressed, or their expression of gratitude, their expression of delight, how loud they are. Write a thank you note to grandma. Don't make a video and yell and scream and send it to grandma. Write her a thank you note. We will send it in the mail or type it. We're not going to call her. We're not going to leave her a voicemail. We don't want screaming. I know you're very happy that she gave you the pony toy or whatever, but whatever. So sometimes parents will encourage, here's the places where it's okay to be loud and scream and shout and, take the kids to that park or whatever circumstance and let them run wild and let the kids do that a little bit or a lot. So it's all good. There's just these contrasts of what works. And for some children, some households, there's more of a, there's not that much supervision directly in terms of disciplining. There's just the presence of an adult. So the children kind of do whatever. The adults don't intervene very much. When the child has a concern, they come to the adult and let them know. So that's one context, kind of the traditional, primitive context. If the children just do whatever, when they need help, they go ask for it. And the adults are always nearby. But the adults aren't actually supervising and kind of, structuring the activities of the children much. In modern context, we take the children, we dump them off at the place where you have the government specialist to, manage this classroom of 20 or 30 or 40 kids, little kids in some cases. And that's a different context. It's a very different context. So the kids, there's a lot of kids around. They're all going to want to roughhouse with each other. There's their natural instincts for competition and, physical, activity, including physical competition, physical aggression, at least amongst boys, or let's say mostly amongst boys. Girls will have different kinds of competition, but not necessarily physical, at least at certain ages. So in a context where basically we need to have the kids sit down and shut up and listen and do their assignment, then that's going to be pressured. That's going to be reinforced. And that's going to, I don't care what you're interested in. Here's the assignment. This is what we're going to study today. Oh, you had a great time on summer vacation or last weekend, or you saw a really funny show. That's great. Talk about it during recess. Now we are going to talk about cholesterol. Or, I don't know, the Greek alphabet or whatever. And not that some kids will be like super, oh my God, this is awesome. Cool. I like shapes. I like drawing, whatever. I like painting. Some kids are totally delighted. Their delight continues into the structured activity. So there's no suppression of delight. In fact, the adults are just structuring the delight of the children. That's fine. But at some point there can be, oh, you're delighted about, the show you watched over the weekend or last night. Well, that's cool, but this is a silent test. You're not supposed to talk during this test. I know you're finished with the test. Don't talk. You have to remain silent. You can draw on your paper. You can bring a book and read it, you know, your own casual reading Nancy Drew book or whatever. But you can't talk. You can't write notes to each other. You can't pass notes, at least. Can't disturb the ritual of the classroom. So there's different social contexts, and in some cases it's more the adults imposing on the children and suppressing the children. Stop doing that and do this. In very structured, external imposition of discipline. As distinct from the adults are always available. They're never turning their back on the kids and, oh, I'll be back in a couple minutes. You guys manage yourselves for a few minutes. There's always adults available. They always care. They're always transitionally available, where they'll transition kids in and out of activities. There's like more of a sense of economic abundance in some cases, where the adults can stop what they're doing and involve the kids, and sometimes that's going to dramatically slow down whatever the parent is doing to involve kids, but they have time and abundance to do it. Economic abundance to do it, so they can involve the kids in the cooking or in the gardening or whatever is going on, in the foraging, weaving, sewing, whatever, painting, doing chores in the household. Involve the children. You can scrub the tub, just, oh, that's really good, and then the parent has to come and redo everything anyway. But the kid, the kid's play starts to form into doing chores and being functional and contributing to the household. They might not initially contribute, they might distract the parent for the most part, but eventually they learn skills that are useful for themselves in their whole lives and in the household as a youth as well. So there's this casual, gentle, maybe one-on-one supervision available, but the child has to ask for it. The child has an opportunity to develop self-discipline because there's not so much structuring and sheltering and then suddenly a removal of structure. So there's not that disorientation. There's lots of opportunity for the child to develop self-discipline, to express their interests. If the child wants to learn to read, then they'll be shown how to read. There's no like, oh, it's 1820 in the parts of the U.S. where that kind of child learning to read will result in the child being killed, or the person that teaches them being, whipped or hung to death. And I'm talking about slavery, by the way. Although there are many other occasions than that particular instance of slavery, but lots of occasions where literacy was not encouraged. It was strongly discouraged. But in some cases, you don't have to encourage a child to read for them to develop an interest in it. If people around them are reading, they're probably going to be intrigued. What are you doing, Daddy? I'm reading the newspaper. I'm reading a magazine. I'm reading a book or whatever. Why? What's it about? It's just freaking natural for kids to eventually want to, get involved in whatever's going on around them. So if people are reading in their midst, they're going to get intrigued. They're going to get curious. Show me how to do it. What does it mean? What are you talking about? Those are just weird shapes. They're meaningless shapes. What is that? What's that stuff on the page? It's magical. What do you mean you can write down what I said and then read it back to me and repeat what I just said 20 straight words? That's impossible. You can't remember that. And then they write down the thing and repeat the whole thing back to them and say, I think that is what I said. How did you do that? Well, I wrote it down. These are letters and these are words, and that's how you spell the things you said. And the kid doesn't get it, and they're interested. They might be confused at first, but then they're interested. All right, so natural interest, natural delight. Oh my God, that's fascinating. That's normal for kids. Certain kids, they go around, they're little machines for finding fascinating, fun things, even getting, making messes or, complicating things, getting stuck up in a tree. Can somebody climb up the tree and help me get out? Whatever, that's normal for kids to do it. That's maybe more what a cat does than a kid, but anyway, you get the basic idea. Kids will create complications, but out of just natural curiosity. They're freaking hugely curious. They ask why a lot, you might have noticed. And if they're not satisfied with the answer, they keep asking why. So there's this natural curiosity. There's fun, delight, fascination, intrigue, passion, enthusiasm all over the place. Could adults ever be jealous of the enthusiasm and loud enthusiasm of children? Yes. Could adults ever be embarrassed by their own lack of enthusiasm? Yes. How might the adults be embarrassed by a lack of enthusiasm? Well, in a context when somebody else is being extremely enthusiastic and loud, then it's more obvious that the adult is clammed up and suppressed and, emotionally tense or anxious or whatever. So if you've got a freaking free, vibrant, radiant little kid going, wow, nuts, in a good way, maybe, and then this, really suppressed, anxious adult, well, the adult is naturally going to suppress that child or relax their suppression. They're going to start laughing at the child, so a few different things can happen. But if the adult doesn't have that transitional exposure to the child to gradually enjoy the child's delight, then if if the adult comes home from work or hasn't seen the child comes home from school or whatever, and the adult's in a bad mood and the adult's pissed off and they're hiding all their disappointment and they're hiding their gratitude and enthusiasm and what they're really motivated to do, and they don't want to tell the child what they're really interested in because that'll upset the child, because then the child will be, well, what do you mean, and what's that, so I'm not going to be able to go to that thing I want to go to, or there can be this dynamic where the parent doesn't want to upset the child. Why? Because the parent doesn't want to be upset, and it makes sense. But there can be transitions where, or incremental exposure, where the adult is able to express plenty of things to the child. Where the adult doesn't adopt a mode of hiding from the child. Maybe the adult says, yes, daddy is sad, or mommy is sad, or anxious, or whatever. And maybe they say, I'm not going to give you the detail of it right now. We'll talk about it later, by which they might mean in 6 years when the parent is ready to talk about sexuality or whatever with that child that's now 2 or something, or 4. Whatever the context may be. If there's an adult issue, someone's dying, somebody got a medical report of serious critical condition. There's all sorts of reasons that a parent might be secretive, but or might hide details of what's going on. But if they hide their emotions, that's another thing. So if they hide their experience or their emotions, that's, I'm going to call it unfortunate or unfavorable. It would be ideal that the adult express their emotions or display their emotions, be honest, not take it out on the child, not deny it, not hide it, just be straight, be honest and direct about their emotions. And then as far as the detail of why, well, they might give a vague explanation, they might give no explanation, they might give a somewhat detailed explanation, and that might go great. So back to this idea of children being subject to pressure. The adults may pressure the children the adults may hide emotions, repress their own emotions, and then also repress the emotions of the child. If the child is really displaying delight, then that can upset the parent, and the parent feels how disappointed they are. If the child expresses rage, that can embarrass the parent or trigger the parent to go, you're going to be mad? I'm mad. I have reason to be mad at your grandfather or grandmother, whatever the issues are, so if the child expresses anger, that can trigger a surfacing of repressed emotions for the adult. So the adult then is got to deal with their anger issues that they've repressed, or whatever it may be. Grief, anger, sadness, joy, delight, enthusiasm, whatever. So the adult may suppress the child. The child gets intimidated or pressured into minimizing their display of emotion and even into minimizing fun. They start to develop routines and habits that actually avoid too much fun or too much enthusiasm, displays of too much enthusiasm. They don't want people to know what they like because then somebody will tease them for liking it. That's a similar thing that can be observed in some children. So the child can get an experience of being pressured or intimidated, and they may minimize fun, or they might, how do you stop displaying fun? You have to stop having fun. You have to avoid the things that you think are really fun. If you don't want people to know that you enjoy something, and they don't want you to be loud, you actually have to stop doing the thing that you super enjoy and that's really exciting to you. You can't suppress, or at a certain point, the child isn't very good at suppressing their joy and delight. They can't play with the thing and not go, boom. They have little tanks or Star Wars things or whatever. They're going to make noise with them. You got to put those things away and out of sight, and then the child never asks for them, never brings them down, never starts playing with them, and then they won't be delighted and excited about it. They've got to avoid the things that are fun in order to be quiet. Okay, well, let's play Angry Bird video game, or Pong, or Tetris, or Candy Crush, or something that's not, the excitement level is pretty moderate or low. In fact, it can actually be a boring thing to do, but you do it because you're on a car ride or whatever. So the children can get intimidated or pressured into minimizing fun, to minimizing enthusiasm, delight. That can happen at home, of course, as I mentioned, quite a bit. It can mention at schools, as I mentioned, and in public, like at a restaurant or whatever, a library, at a funeral, at a park, it might be encouraged. At other places, it might be discouraged, or somewhere in between. Certain things are encouraged, certain things are discouraged. It's fine to do the thing as long as you have your earbuds in. But not at a funeral. You can't play a video game quietly at a funeral if you're 7. You have to sit through the funeral. If you're 4, they'll let you listen to the Barney audio or watch the DVD, with your earbuds in to hear the DVD of Barney. Okay, yeah, we don't want a babysitter. We're going to take you, and we're going to let you watch the thing, and just be quiet. And we'll have our funeral, and, we'll let you do your thing because you're 3 or you're 4 or whatever. So children may be told to calm down, to settle down. Two adults may scold each other in the midst of the parent and say, don't encourage him. One of you could get hurt. And then that creates this burden on the child of now the child doesn't want their parent to get in trouble. So now they're like set up in that triangle where the child's now the protector of the one parent from the scolding and harassment of the other. Or the child can adopt that role. So, the child's now apologizing to the one parent. Oh, I didn't mean to have fun with you. I didn't mean for you to get in trouble. I didn't plan to have fun. I just accidentally had fun with you and was laughing. I'm sorry. And it's, that's really kind of unfortunate. So, again, there can be a general repression or suppression of all loud emotional expression. I'm going to count laughing and crying as kind of the 2 most potentially disruptive. And I do want to note that these are physiological processes that can have some benefit. There are reasons that kids or other people can feel better after laughing. A really good hard laugh or a good cry, the people can feel much better. Why? Or how do you feel better? Well, you feel more relaxed. You feel just, more relaxed would be a very, very good way to put it. How does that happen? Physiologically, how does that happen? Crying and laughing are involving a bunch of muscles, the diaphragm at the bottom of the rib cage and all these other muscles. There's a rebalancing of physical tension and a correcting of misalignment in the spine and in the skull. There's a bunch of bones in the skull. People might think of the skull as one bone. No, it's a bunch of different plates and moving parts. So crying and laughing, I mean like really good, deep, rich crying or laughing, can dramatically realign lots of stuff. And people may need to rest afterward. They may sleep really good after that. but they may feel so much better the next day or right afterwards or whenever. Crying and laughing can be just tremendously healing. So gratitude can get buried. If it gets buried, how can it resurface? How can it surface? That gets into grief, grievances, and avoidance. So grief is when I'm grateful for something that I've lost. Oh, I see. When I've lost something, I'm reading my notes, they were a little confusing. When I'm grateful for something that I've lost, and I'm more grateful for it than I'm scared to display my grief, or to display my gratitude. So when I'm grateful for something and I'm scared of displaying my gratitude, but I'm more grateful for the thing because I just lost it and I just overwhelms my suppression mechanisms. I've lost the thing, or I think I've lost it. So then I just stop suppressing my display of gratitude. Even though I'm scared to display the gratitude, I just can't suppress it anymore, and I just explode in a display of appreciation or gratitude. And that's grief. And I'm also, there's that fear of I'm not supposed to be showing this gratitude. I shouldn't have this gratitude. I'm embarrassed that I valued this thing so much. I love this person so much. I was talking about my dog that I would chase and never catch. I let that dog out. It ran into the road, and then it got hit by a car, and it was put to sleep by a veterinarian later that day because it was pretty seriously injured. So I was grieving. Next day, Mom, I don't think she really wanted to just deal with all the grief that I was processing. It was really distracting. She didn't know what to do with it other than get me another dog. So she did. She got me a puppy the next day, I believe. And it worked generally. I was happier to have the puppy than to grieve. But, what else could have happened as far as if I had really gone through that full grieving process, then and shared it with somebody like my mom, then she would have to listen to me talk about how much I loved running around with the dog, and Mom would have to get present to the delight that I had for the dog and how much I loved that dog. And I might be mad at Mom. I might show, Mom might get jealous or whatever stuff, intriguing little twists could happen. As you might know, some parents start early, or even if they start late, they might not be all that emotionally stable whenever they start. Or at whatever stage, whether they've started a long time ago or what. So grief would be, I'm grateful about something, but I'm so scared to display my gratitude or enthusiasm that I wait until, I don't specifically wait, but until I think I've lost that thing, maybe have actually lost it, then I experience this grief, the grief. Then I display the gratitude. Then I voice my appreciation of the thing, my delight in that thing. I want to reminisce, and it can be very healthy for somebody to reminisce. If they've been suppressing their delight for something and they take a long time to reminisce and how good it was, that can be pretty healthy for them. Somebody outside looking in may say, oh, well, they're really withdrawing into themselves and looking in their own photo books a lot and crying and laughing and talking to themselves, and that's all they talk about is that they lost their husband of 20 years or 40 years. That's all they talk about anymore. It's been 3 days. Why are they still, gosh, they're just so obsessed. So there might be social criticism, whatever. It can be really healthy for somebody to go through their past delights, to reminisce. That can be wonderful. They can do it by themselves, with other people, with groups, whatever. No issue. So grief is when somebody was grateful, but the fear of displaying the gratitude interrupted or totally prevented the display of gratitude. And then maybe I didn't even recognize how important something was to me. Maybe I went numb to it. Again, if I want to avoid social displays of something, I have to, avoid the thing. So, it's like somebody, if the actor that plays their favorite Star Wars character dies, and then they are grieving about it. Well, they're not grieving about that person dying. They're grieving about something else somebody else dying, some other stuff, and the only thing that they are comfortable socially displaying is grief about that. Oh, somebody got killed. There was 12 people got killed in some shooting or car wreck or whatever, 1,000 or 6,000 miles away or 600 miles away. That doesn't involve anybody I know. It doesn't really have anything to do with me. But I'm really upset about it. I'm grieving it. I'm outraged. Okay, that's a socially appropriate expression of outrage and grief. And the less that somebody sees, the more constricted somebody is in regard to what would be socially appropriate for them to, as a trigger to display grief or outrage, then the bigger their outbursts are going to be, the more startling, and the less frequent. It's going to be issues that are far removed from them. So if somebody's grieving somebody, close to them dying, or somebody close to them getting injured, they're outraged about it. The closer that it is to them personally, the more real it is. The more the emotion is real. If I'm outraged about something that happened 400 years ago, I may have real emotion about it, but the specific event really isn't that important to me. Probably 400 years ago, 6,000 miles away, involving nobody that I know, and I'm upset about it. That's kind of weird. Unless I'm emotionally suppressed in general, and then that's a socially approved outlet for outrage, grief, whatever it may be, condemnation, etc. So we've already kind of got into this idea of grievances. So grievances is when there's repressed gratitude. So I'm terrified of displaying gratitude, so I repress it. And then there's no trigger for expressing it. There's nothing to cause me grief to express my gratitude. So I'm just looking around for any reason to display any emotion. I'm seeking out justifications for resentment and rage. I'm going to vilify others to weave narratives of victimhood. I'm going to accuse people of criticizing me and condemning me. All these kind of things. Why? To attract attention, or hopefully to effectively attract attention. That's the background of stating certain grievances aren't stated to the person. That, if I'm mad at my grandmother and I say to my grandmother, I'm mad that you didn't show up, that you said you would show up and you didn't show up, and you didn't text me to let me know you weren't going to be there, and that was embarrassing and I didn't like it, and I don't know if I'm concerned now about what's going on with you. Is your health good? Is your memory good? Can I count on you for stuff? Should I, plan to have other people be my partners, and when I'm making plans, should I do it with other people instead of you? So those kind of grievances are, you can call that just quality communication. Resentments and contempt and unexpressed grievances. Okay, maybe that's a good way to put it. So grievances that aren't directly expressed, maybe passive aggression, but there are grievances that are held within and become grudges. Grievances held so long that it becomes a grudge. Sometimes people cultivate those. They construct those. So it allows them to draw attention to themselves in a socially approved way. Somewhere in there is what they're grateful for. I would be grateful if you let me know, back to the example of somebody not picking them up when they said they would. I'd be grateful if you weren't able to pick me up, that you let me know so I can arrange for somebody else to pick me up or get a ride or whatever. And if you know way in advance that it's not going to work, then tell me or decline. Don't have me thinking that you're going to finish what you've started or do what you said you would do. Don't leave it out there. Don't leave me out there. Like, be in communication with me. So, or be honest with me about your willingness and ability to perform some tasks. Not because you think you should, not because you wish you would be able to, not because you're delighted that I asked, but only say yes if you are willing and able to do it. And if you find it at any point in the process that you aren't willing and able, or that you're going to be late or whatever, let me know, especially in modern times with text messages and stuff. Or you can, call the school so that the school will say, pass a note and say, by the way, your grandmother is coming to pick you up, but she's going to be delayed about 30 minutes, just so you know. and whatever. So people are prepared, so they're not worrying. Um, uh, so I didn't really explain here why people will go into grief, or just right now I didn't explain why enthusiasm and gratitude get suppressed and then it'll end up resulting in grievance. I'm going to just kind of leave it that I've said enough about it. You kind of got that. I don't have more that I want to say about it right now. Maybe I don't think I'll have any more. This is basically the end here. I'm going to do the one more thing about avoidance, which I've been avoiding up till now. No, I've just been setting it up. I've been preparing you for it. So I'll say about grievances, if we don't express them because we're not supposed to display anger, because we're not supposed to be angry people, we are polite. It's not right to display anger. It's best to be perfect and saintly and polite. And that means no expressive anger. Don't express your grievances. Don't express your disappointments. Well, that leads to outbursts of really big grudges and then really big contempt and big grievances, big upsets, big rage instead of just anger. If I'm angry at grandma because she didn't, what? You did that instead and you could have notified me and you didn't do it? I'm angry that you didn't. That's not rage. That's just very specific anger, specifically communicated. That's just anger. I'm disappointed you didn't come and I'm mad that you didn't. This is embarrassing to me. This scares me. I'm concerned. What do I need to do to manage myself and be more responsible for myself in the future? Because grandma isn't being responsible in her communication. Because she could have and didn't even think of it. Wow, maybe you need, maybe those medications you're on are too intense or whatever. These are some supposedly humorous asides. If you're offended by some of what I just said, I take it back. So I was talking about avoidance. So there's this rebellion pattern. So when I talked about making promises, so grandma says she's going to show up at a certain time, and she doesn't. Maybe this happens repeatedly. She keeps saying, yeah, I'll call you. Yeah, I'll pick you up. Yeah, I'll come visit. And is really bad as far as, really inconsistent. Her actions don't match with her words. So she's saying sometimes what's going on is people are really concerned about avoiding social condemnation and attracting, competing for social approval. So they'll say things that they think are what they should say, but they actually resent having to do those things. They really want to be left alone, maybe, and don't want to get pressured. They think of it as being pressured. They don't want to get pressured into, picking up their grandchild from school or whatever. Why do you have to ask me that? You asked me that just last month. You want me to do it again? Can't you just walk? You're 7 years old. I know it's raining and it's 20 degrees in Minnesota, or snowing, whatever. Right, it's cold outside. Well, I wouldn't want to drive to pick you up. It's so cold. Anyway, so, and totally valid. If somebody says no, grandma or anybody else, that's fine. But the distinction between saying no and saying yes but not doing it is weird. Or saying yes but then having lots of excuses and justifications and all this drama around, I really had good intentions, but I'm not doing it. That's could be related to some kind of, perfectionism and fitting some kind of ideal of how people should be. I don't want to disappoint others. I want to be polite. I don't want to be angry. I don't want them to criticize me. And all this self-consciousness and paranoia, that is distinct from just, gosh, I could come pick you up. I tell you what, if I come pick you up, will you wash my car or, do an hour of chores at my house or something? Like, I'll pick you up and I'll give you a ride to that, that event, but we're going to make it into an exchange. This is like the grandmother saying it to the child, where the child's at a point where they can start to be responsible for partnering with other people and respecting that other people are making sacrifices for them. So they start to, you could say bargain, but they start to contribute to others, and there starts to be a parity, P-A-R-I-T-Y, or a balance of fairness to the thing, instead of one person totally depending on the other and totally, I don't want to say exploiting, but taking advantage of, again, if there is a grandmother who won't say no, they can't say no to their grandkids and they're always spoiling them, that's not necessarily ideal. Better might be for the grandparent to say, well, I will do that, but you're old enough to be responsible. Do you have some gas money? Give me gas money for that? Will you do some chores in exchange for my time? You're going to, whatever. So that's just, I don't know. It's a pure innocent thing. Oh, I'm open to do that. I'm able to do that. I'm not really that interested in picking you up and driving you to that thing. I don't want to attend it. You want me to take you to it and then come back 2 hours later and pick you up? Yeah, I don't want to hang out there during it. Well, I will do it if blah, 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 blah. I'm open to it. I'm willing to do it. How about you do this thing that I want you to do, that you're small enough and you're agile enough and you're whatever, your eyesight's good. I'm going to have you do this chore for me that I don't really want to do, or that I do want to do. I'm even going to show you how to do it. But I want you involved because I'm concerned about you, and I'm not going to, I will take you to that social event. I don't really love you doing that thing, but I'll take you to that. Maybe I'll hang out a little bit to check it out and see if I approve of it or not. And then I'm going to have you do some stuff with me and, give you some of the home cooking from grandma too, because I don't think that you're getting fed very well. And, some of grandma's discipline and supervision and interaction to just, kind of connect with the youngin' and maybe show them how to paint interior of a room the right way, or whatever the chore will be. Sweep the house the right way, clean the refrigerator the right way. Grandpa's going to take you up on the roof, and you're going to help him repair the roof. You're going to help him build a shed. And in exchange for that, yes, I will give you a ride to whatever. So, avoidance. So people can make a promise out of good intentions, out of what they should do, the right thing to do, but they rebel against it, they resist it, they delay it, they postpone it, they justify not doing it, they always have a new excuse. And what it ultimately does is they're setting up for other people, they're causing other people grief, they're disappointing other people, they're attracting criticism and condemnation. So if they're expecting criticism from other people and they're not getting it and they want to be criticized to have that emotional drama so they can experience being criticized, they're going to set up to be criticized. They're going to sabotage things in such a way that other people are going to express disappointment to them, express anger to them. They're going to cause other people grief. So they state their willingness to do something, maybe make promises to do it, specific, I'll do it this time, by a certain time I will have it done and I'll let you know that I'm done. And if they keep not doing it and always have an excuse, then that becomes weird. I'm not really interested. I just said I was because whatever. That's not usually what people say. They usually say, well, I am interested, but I don't have enough time. I am interested, but I don't have enough money. I am interested, but it's too complicated. I don't already know how to do it. So I'd have to learn something new. I am interested, but it's too stressful right now. I'm in a stressful time of my life. We'll get back to it another time. Again, if they've said that they're interested, if they talk about it a lot and they bring it up and they say yes, and then later say, well, I'm not interested, then it's weird. Or I've lost interest. Or maybe they have. That can happen occasionally. If it happens a lot, if it's a pattern where there's this frequent setting up of an expectation, a statement of willingness, there's ability, there's a statement of willingness, and then no action. They're attracting a certain kind of social interaction. They're testing. You could say they're attracting criticism. And when they eventually do get criticism or an expression of disappointment, they may react very strongly, passionately, hysterically, aggressively. What? You are criticizing me? You're disappointed that blah, 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 blah. You have no right to be disappointed, blah, blah, blah. I'm disappointed, blah, blah, blah. And again, in an isolated case, and especially if it's relatively small cases, we can see this happening. But if it's happening between people, it's not necessarily a good sign of the quality of their interaction. I mean, to say it this way, if it's happening between two people repeatedly, it's not necessarily a good sign about the quality of their interaction. Maybe they have some great things in their interaction, but some things are missing for them individually or for them in interaction with each other. Maybe there's something that's been missing. Maybe there's not that full range of emotional expressiveness. Maybe there's still some suppression, some self-consciousness and anxiety about what is the right thing to do. Am I being the kind of person that I should be? Am I being polite? Am I avoiding anger? Am I going to get to heaven? Am I going to make my parents proud? All these kind of things, because they're pretty anxious and ashamed in general and embarrassed about who they are in their life. I need to do some stuff to make them proud. That's a way that some people could orient. Again, that reminds me of this term burden. There's a burden with, I'm the savior of my family. I'm the savior of my parents or something. Well, I don't have to take on that role. I don't have to save my parents. I don't have to save my spouse. I don't have to save my children. Of those things, it might make most sense, and it might be most common that I attempt to save my children. But in saving my children, I don't mean it in some metaphorical way like the spiritual salvation necessarily. Certainly that's possible, and there can be great value and meaning to that. But if I'm saving my children from learning something the hard way, okay, it's a specific kind of saving my children. I'm not saving my children from grief. I'm not saving my children from disappointment. I'm not saving my children from making mistakes. I'm not saving my children from learning. I'm not saving my children from self-discipline. I'm not saving them from delight and gratitude and enthusiasm and high-quality communication. I save them from specific risks, or attempt to prevent or minimize certain risks or certain things. I want to have them learn very effectively and safely and efficiently. So I attempt to teach them or set up demonstrations or lessons that are very accessible and appropriate for them. That is not the same as I want them to avoid disappointment or avoid making mistakes. Back to my example of grandma who brings the child over to have the child help with painting or whatever thing, or help with finishing, like putting finish on some furniture, whatever tasks. We're going to show the child how to do it. Yes, it's a useful thing. Maybe we'll help them change the oil in the car, change a tire, whatever stuff, put up Christmas lights. Doesn't matter what it is. The point is that there will be this ongoing interaction. The adult's in charge. The adult's got all the tools and the expertise and the ladder or whatever, and they're going to show the kid how to do it. The kid's going to make some mistakes. The child's going to get corrected. The adult's going to correct the child at some point. The child will make some mistake. The adult will correct the child in some cases. In other cases, the child will see that they made a mistake, that what they're doing isn't working. The adult will challenge them to say, okay, well, figure out how to do that right. You're close. You didn't get it yet. And the child will learn. So it's a setup for adaptiveness, for finding out what fits, for that pure innocence. So we can take casual tasks, we can take relatively unimportant tasks, games, and make them into learning opportunities. So what is more stressful? Okay, it's back to the excuse that I would do it, I want to do it, but it's just too stressful right now. Well, what's more stressful? Experimenting with something that's new, or frequently imagining that experimental activity, but never actually experimenting with it. So frequently imagining it goes poorly, imagining that over and over and over, not doing the activity, that's actually pretty stressful. It's creating like this paranoia about doing the thing. It's an avoidance mechanism. It does avoid the thing, and it generates ongoing stress. It sustains stress. So it's also an avoidance in terms of avoiding enthusiasm, honesty, avoiding one's actual anxiety level. Like the baseline anxiety level will say, well, this stressful thing, this thing is stressing me. You keep pressuring me to do this thing. Well, what if the pressure is withdrawn? Oh, then they drop back down to that baseline anxiety that is right in their midst. They have nothing to distract themselves from it. So they feel their physical discomfort and anxiety, their baseline, their standard familiar level of anxiety. Maybe they've said, no, I'm not anxious. No, I'm not anxious. And at some point, they, maybe they isolate themselves socially and they get the opportunity to have no social observers around them, no people observing them, so they aren't concerned about condemnation, and then they feel their anxiety, they feel their physical stress, and then they start to adjust to it. They get a massage, or they relax, they do some practices to relax themselves, or they read something that helps them work through some issues and clarify and resolve some issues. They go to counseling, they go to a retreat, they sing some songs that they love, they reminisce about the dog that they used to chase in the backyard and could never catch but really loved playing with. And they share the story with people that appreciate the story. So I think I'm going to come back and repeat, just blow through my recommendations before I conclude. I did have one other paragraph here prepared. The key issue here is if someone is terrified of expressing disappointment or discomfort, then they will compulsively avoid the unfamiliar. They will fear the unfamiliar. And that's interesting, because you can't really fear the unknown. You can only fear what you imagine about the unknown. If you don't know something, you don't know enough to fear it. You can be curious or not curious. You can't fear it. With the unfamiliar, you can have an expectation. You can also have a sense of, I'm afraid in general, and I don't want other people to know about it because I'm paranoid. And then anything unfamiliar is going to reveal my paranoia and anxiety, and I don't want anybody to know, so I'm going to avoid the unfamiliar. So people may fear or avoid the unfamiliar as a potential trigger of repressed emotion, of existing shameful disappointment, of existing shameful anger, shameful fear, whatever. Why are those things shameful? Well, they're not inherently shameful, but someone may be ashamed of disappointment, anger, fear. They may suppress those things because they may be concerned about social criticism. So again, there's my recommendations for what can we do if we are at least curious about the idea that we might have some degree of perfectionism and social anxiety. So the person who fears the unfamiliar and avoids the unfamiliar is organizing their life around shame. Specifically, they're avoiding their life around avoiding shame, but that's still organizing their life relative to the possibility of shame. Shame is the big, central, main focus, and avoiding it is how we organize life. And of course, we don't admit to doing this. If somebody directly asks us if that's what we're doing, we're unlikely to say, oh yeah, exactly, oh totally, that's what I'm doing. We tend to be numb to the fact that we have, these avoidance patterns. They become unconscious. They become habitual. I'm so ashamed about being ashamed or being embarrassed or whatever, that I'm going to go numb to it. I don't want to be present to my avoidance mechanisms and practices and skills. And these are actual skills. They are functional. They do fit, or otherwise they would never happen. So people could organize their lives around avoiding shame, which is basically organizing their lives around shame. And another possibility transitionally would be to kind of seek out small embarrassments and small shames, safe exposures. Maybe you do want a 15-minute, once a week or twice a week conversation where the other person says nothing and you just confess something. But you know that they can hear you, they understand, they comprehend, they're attentive, they're listening. You confess something, you reveal the embarrassing, shameful thing, and they go, I understand. And if they're upset or if they have criticism, they don't display it. And there can be like that advance agreement. So that's something that if somebody engages in that expressiveness and exposure, that can be really helpful, healthy and helpful. That could be another thing to consider as a adaptation or a recommendation. My prior list: what is relevant for someone who frequently presumes that others are criticizing them? Increase awareness of possible discomfort, tension, and stress. That could be to habitually interrupt processes with an alarm, like routines. Every 2 hours, take a 5-minute walk. Get up and stretch to feel your body, right? To habitually or routinely check in with your physical stress levels, your physical tension. Do some exercises, 3 times a week or whatever, that are just simple range of motion exercises. They're looking for restriction, limitation, stress, tension, pain even. So there's a variety of methods that I already mentioned a few as far as increasing awareness of possible discomfort, tension, or stress. Second, managing pace of all interactions. So speed them up, slow them down, whatever it takes to maintain an awareness of stress and to avoid boredom and tension as far as not moving forward or not being on the actual subject of interest. Just get to the point in some cases. Let's wrap this up and move on, and I am interested, but here's what I'm interested in, and let's go ahead and get to that now. So like speeding up the interaction. Let's not get bogged down in a lot of other details. Let's speed up the interaction, at least in regard to a certain subject or topic. Or let's just slow down. Let's just take a break. Let's come back to this in a week. Let's come back to this, our next committee meeting in 2 months. Whatever it is. We're not getting anywhere today, or I'm tired, or for no reason, let's postpone it. My motion to continue the hearing till next month or next week is, the motion that I present to the court, or to the, if it's whatever, you got the idea. So another thing would be to select people who seem the most attentive and perceptive and respectful and interact with them more or interact with them the most. Concentrate our interactions in those people. And how do we identify them? Well, we may already know them. And if we don't already know some people like that, then that gets to the next one. Just interact with more people. Not a lot with any one person, but just disperse your interaction to interact with however much you do it. If it's 15 minutes a day with one different person and never twice in the same week with the same person, that really minimizes your interaction. You really get to process, was that stressful? Was that interesting? Did I like them? Take the time. If that's what you want, take the time. Do very isolated, small interactions and have lots of time to process them. And then next week, plan to pick 2 of my favorite of those 7 to attempt to do, interact with again, and then bring some other new people into the rotation. Whatever works for you. The idea is interact in a way that you can notice who seems to have a lot of repressed contempt, who's pouring contempt at other people and at groups, and just, is a very contemptuous person, very critical in a harsh way, ridiculing others, vilifying others, expressing disgust and disturbance and condemnation. So we can notice, who do I like talking to, who's fun to talk to. Basically, if I focus on who feels fun and safe and interesting to talk to, who seems mature, attentive, perceptive, respectful, I don't really need to filter out people that don't do those things if I just have my standard as people that I like interacting with and that I have high quality interactions with. But I also might reduce my exposure to people who are borderline, or maybe there's some people that I don't have the ability to complete, or it doesn't work for me to completely cut them off just all of a sudden. So I need to make some variation. I need to slow down the interaction with them. I need to interact with them, but only when there's a third party present, and a specific third party that I know is really good at helping to keep the communication really smooth and efficient and concise and clear and powerful. So there can be an overall withdrawing from social activity, especially concentrated social activity with a particular person or group. So we want to back off from particular people, particular groups, or all people in all groups. Just back off from everybody and then start to look for, create a lot of gaps, a lot of relaxation, comfort. I'm going to select who I want to talk to, when I want to talk to them, what I want to talk to them about, no pressure. And if I feel discomfort in that social interaction, I'm going to note it and I'm going to minimize that further or eliminate them from my, my rotation of who I interact with voluntarily. And if I have to interact with them involuntarily, then I bring a lawyer with me, or I bring a cop with me, or I bring, just, a 7-year-old kid with me to simply be my excuse to leave quickly, or whatever it is, I'd love to talk to you more, but I've got to take this child off to the grandma's. So there can be the setup of excuses that I only use for that person. And if that works, if that fits, fine. So these are the relevant adaptation thing is ultimately do a thing because it fits. So be open to noticing what's working. What are the results of the different things you're doing? And keep doing the things that are working, and the things that aren't working or aren't working well, do them less or stop doing them. Wow, this was like, what is this? Boom! That was, I said boom right on the 110-minute mark, so just under 2 hours, 10 minutes less than 2 hours. This has been embracing gratitude and releasing perfectionism. First, kind of getting familiar with what perfectionism is. We didn't talk a hell of a lot about releasing it, but frankly, acknowledging it and like kind of just going, oh, that's what I do. That's what other people do that annoys me, and I do the same kind of thing in different degrees. Wow, that could be quite effective as far as setting up a release of perfectionism. Maybe you have a sense of humor. Based on my sense of humor about some of these subjects, you have a sense of humor and relaxation and respect for perfectionism. I understand why it happens. People get pressured, they get anxious, they want to adhere to ideals and be loyal and faithful and, you know, compete for social validation and avoid social condemnation. It makes sense. So this has been embracing gratitude and releasing perfectionism, including the various correlates of perfectionism: anxiety, grief, grievances, and avoidance. You have enjoyed this. In case you didn't know, this was delightful. Your enthusiasm at this point is pretty much off the chart. You're like a 3-year-old who's chasing a dog that you know you'll never catch, but you're just having so much fun, it's ridiculous. Grandma could be pretty proud of you. She might start giggling just because she saw how much fun you were having. That'd be cool.